You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the bench. And as you can see, we have our next project here, and I had to go handheld camera because I couldn't get it back far enough to get the whole thing in frame. This thing is big. What we have is a Pioneer SX-1980 receiver, and as you can see, we're probably going to need a bigger boat. This thing is the biggest piece of audio gear I've ever had on this bench, and that includes that PV CS 1200, the Marantz 2500. I mean, all of them. None of them were as large as this thing, and it was a real pain to hump this thing up onto this bench. So as you can see, it is in really rough shape. Spoiler alert, I already opened up the covers to kind of look inside to get an assessment of it. The owner purchased this from someone. I think he got a pretty good price on it, and it was supposed to be functional, I think, but he didn't know a whole lot else about it. And as you can see, it looks as if somebody has been trying to start a restoration on it, because this has been somewhat kind of stripped and sanded. But let's take some of the covers off, and I'll show you what's going on inside. Okay, well, this is it with the covers off. And although it is a receiver, I think the only thing we can receive from this receiver right now is tetanus. So I'm going to have my shots up to date on this one. But if we look down, you can just see how cruddy this thing really is. I mean, it's pretty bad. So I think what may have happened is maybe this thing got into some water or something, or in a damp area. But we're going to take the transformer out, we're going to strip this thing down to absolutely bare necessities, and we're going to clean everything and restore. We're going to repaint the transformers, replace the main filter caps, total restoration. And when we get onto the bottom of the amplifier, I'll show you some things there that we're going to do that's kind of unique. So it looks as if nothing has been done as far as replacing components, which is a good thing. But alas, not all is lost. They actually put LED lights in the panel. Talk about rearranging the deck furniture on the Titanic. So here we go. Anyway, this is going to be a really fun project, and as you can tell, this is going to be a really long project. So it's definitely going to be a series, and it's definitely going to be multiple videos. And what we hope to do is bring this thing back to its former glory. Really, I think we can clean up the faceplate. The dial glass is in really good shape. This looks like a good candidate for restoration, and the owner really wants it done up perfectly, but he has informed me that it will go up for sale. He's kind of like me. He's a collector, and he has way too much gear. So I think this is just one of those things to see if we can do it. So if that sounds interesting to you, stay tuned and let the games begin. So this receiver kind of reminds me of when you go to the grocery store and you purchase a bag of snacks, you know, like pretzels or potato chips or something, and it says on the bag, this product is sold by weight and not by volume. Well, this thing, I think, has been sold by weight and volume. It has it all. So we got the bottom cover off, all joking aside. And let's see, we got that. And we have, what's this? A bottle cap. Maybe that's why everything's rusty. They left the cap off of something and it spilled. Who knows? Let me get a flashlight. Yep, looks like a critter was living in there of some sort. And there was some nasty stuff that fell out when I took the bottom cover off, just more dust bunnies and things. Now, other than that, we have one area on the bottom here. You can see where there's some corrosion, but it doesn't look like anything too serious that we cannot fix. This is the bottom of the tuner assembly, the tuning gang. So this is very repairable. And as you can see from everything else, it doesn't look like anything has been serviced or replaced. Now, these receivers have a tendency to have problems with the power supply board. This is the main power supply board. So what we're going to do is we are actually going to completely remove this one and replace it with an updated one that has some really significant improvements made on the circuit. So this is all going to be gone and all going to be replaced with something completely new and different. A lot of metal work on this one, I think. These, believe it or not, these receivers are not bad to restore because everything's so modular. Everything comes out in pieces, unlike some of the earlier model Pioneers where things get kind of stacked together and wired together. These are really designed to be removed one piece at a time and restored and serviced. Very service-friendly unit, at least from my perspective. So we're going to take everything down to the metal out of here and fix the chassis. And then we're going to go through and recap and restore. So, losing my voice this morning. So anyway, that's kind of where we are with all of this. And I'm just going to get to work. And the fun begins. So, looking over here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of strip this part out down here. And I noticed that there was some work done on this board. Now I can't tell what was replaced. It looks like there's one capacitor here that was done and a couple underneath this little heatsink. But I also noticed that the transformer wires were removed. And looking in here, these wires have been removed and then put back on the board. So this thing has had a little bit of work, but I don't see any work on the amplifier modules or anything else here. So I think we're in good shape. I'm going to strip all of this part of the amp out. I'm going to take the amplifier modules out. I'm going to take the power supply board out and get to the capacitors and get the transformer out. Take this back cover off and start just completely clean this thing out because I cannot stand working on all this crudiness. So when we come back, we'll have this all tore out and we'll go from there, and then we'll see what we've got to deal with here. Okay, that is one huge transformer. You see how small my hand is compared to this thing. It is absolutely massive. And it weighs a ton. And you can see how cruddy it is. The good thing is we can get these screws out all around. And I'm not sure if this is mouse urine or what the heck that is, but I'm going to wear gloves when I'm handling it. But I can get these screws out, we can strip this case down, and we can repaint it so it'll look like brand new. Looking inside, you can see what kind of a mess it is in there. We got a lot of cleaning to do, but that's okay. It's all going to clean up, I think. So, coming along just fine. We're going to do a little break in the action here to give you an update. And as you can see, it's kind of an odd angle we're looking at, but here's the front of the receiver, the top, the tuning gang, and so forth. All of the transformer, the capacitors, everything's been removed, and I've taken the back plate off. And one of the problems is when you're tearing it down this far, which we have to be able to repair this metal, all of these things are connected here. All the jacks and everything you can see are connected. And they run through these little oval shaped holes in the metal. And the only way to get the wires out would be to unwire every connector. So I cheated a little bit and I just took the Dremel and I notched this out. Now this is not going to hurt the structure whatsoever because there's mounting screws here and here and here and here that holds this all together. So all this is going to do is allow us to get the wires so we can pass them out right here. So I just took the Dremel with the cutoff wheel and just cut 2 little openings. And then that way we can just slip these right out like this, and that will free up this plate so we can get it out. So that's just a little tip there. Again, it's not going to hurt anything, and when everything's put together you won't even see it. So it's not a big problem. And now we're ready to take this out and take it down to the workshop, and boy, do we ever have some cleaning to do. Well, it doesn't seem like it, but for the last week or so since I've been working on this, all I've really been doing is cleaning, derusting, repainting, getting the metal parts back to at least to a point that we can put everything back together. And we're almost there now. And I'm down to the point where the only part that really needs some more work is this little lamp and bezel holder. And you can see that it's still pretty rusty. So this is the last part that's going to need painted. The rest of it's not too bad. There's a couple little spots, but I'll give this a quick going over, and I'll shoot it with some paint, and then we're going to put it back together. And while we're at it, I'm going to remove these incandescent bulbs and replace them with LEDs, so that'll be a permanent fix for that. Tons of crud coming out of this thing, and you just kind of have to be patient and clean everything out, and it's really all we can do. So once I get to putting the metal parts back together, I'll come back and we'll see how it looks all back together, at least to get a frame back together, get it to that point. So I have this metal part put back in these 2 sides, and I have the back attached and the jacks put back in, and that wasn't too terrible of a job. But I'm waiting for this little bezel in the front to dry, because it's without all this stuff in there, it's a lot easier to reach in there to get that. I also cleaned up the board here and got the dust off of it, and we're coming right along. So I think the next thing we're going to do is get this bezel put on, and I'm going to put the LEDs in, but I'm not going to connect them. I'm just going to leave them hanging, the wires just hanging, and then we'll run them alongside these and put them in later on. So there we are. That's where we're at. I now have the capacitors fitted in, the main filters, and these are the new ones that I got. Now, the one problem with them is the only ones that I could get available, that there were 4 of them available at a good price with the specs that I actually wanted, were these ones that actually have the mounting studs on the rear. It's not a problem, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a nylon acorn nut and just screw it over there to cover them, because these studs are actually attached to the case of the capacitor, which means they are connected to the negative terminal of the capacitor. So anything that this touches is going to touch the negative terminal of that capacitor. So what we're going to do is insulate those so that that won't happen. I wish I could have gotten the ones without this, but they just weren't available at the time. A lot of times, you know, I talk about things not being available, and I always get email or comments saying, "Oh, I found them at this site or that site or the other site," and that is true. Sometimes they are available, but a lot of times either A, they don't have the quantity that you need, or B, they carry them but they're not in stock, or there's a back order to order them, or they're really expensive. For instance, there was another capacitor that was a little bigger diameter, and we'll get into that here in a minute, and it did not have the stud on the back, and it had almost identical specs to this capacitor, and it would fit right in the bracket without modifying it like I had to with this one. However, they were double the price of these, and there was only one in stock. The other 3 would have been back ordered, and when that happens, I have found out that even when they estimate the back order time, quite often it can be much, much longer than that. So we're just going to go with these because they work perfectly. There were other solutions out there, but when I looked at the specs, and I will post the specs up here on the video, I was particularly interested in the ESR value and the ripple current. These had a much higher ripple current value than some of the other ones that were out there, and they also fit. The spacing of the pins between the positive and negative terminals on the bottom is exactly the same spacing as the original capacitors that came out of here, so I won't have to modify any of the brackets or anything. Now, because these are a little bit smaller diameter, even though they're exactly the same capacitance and voltage rating as the old caps, we had to modify the bracket. And as it turns out, it worked out perfectly. I'll show you here. I was able to get some of this gasket material with the adhesive on the back of it, and you can see how it has these ridges and it's rubberized. So it fit, and it was the exact spacing that I needed to fit these in there. So worked out perfectly. So as I said, I have some nylon acorn nuts that are going to screw over top of this to insulate it. They're on order. I'll have those probably next week, and then there won't be any problem. So we're moving right along with this, and I'm just going to do a couple more little clips, and then I'm going to post this first video. We really didn't get a whole lot into anything because I really had a huge mess to deal with this metal pan down here, and I apologize I did not go into the shop with the camera. It's been extraordinarily hot and humid here for the last week or two, and the humidity level was getting really bad, like fog your glasses when you walk outside bad. And I don't really like bringing the camera into the shop when it's like that. It also was so hot that I would just get out there, do a little bit of work, and then come back in because the shop's not air conditioned or anything. And then the paint took time to dry and cure and so forth. So I just didn't have time to mess around with that this time around. I figure you've seen me do some things in the shop before. So took up a lot of time, but now we're getting to a point now where we can actually start this video as a normal video series for restoring one of these receivers. Again, I don't think anybody expected that mess in here that we had. Okay, let's continue. Well, we got it back together, and it's cleaned up a lot better than it was, so it's now kind of presentable to work on. You can see I have the capacitors, I have begun to put them back in. And as you can see with the pin spacing, everything, it fits perfectly in place of the original capacitors. I am not going to remount this board or rebuild it. That'll be for part 2. So we're going to end this part right here, and I know we didn't get into a lot of technical stuff on this first one, and I really didn't get into much of an explanation of what this receiver is. We really kind of just needed to get this thing to a point where we can actually work on it. It was so cruddy and filthy, I didn't even know if it was going to be, with all that rust and everything, I just didn't know what we were going to get into. But now we have a very presentable receiver that's going to actually turn out nice, I think. So when part 2 starts, we'll get really into the meat and potatoes of this, and I hope you'll be with me for that. So thank you all, and thank you all for your contributions and comments and all your things that you contributed to the channel here. And we'll be seeing you very soon. And as always, peace, joy, happiness, and good health in your lives. Take care. Bye-bye.